Welcome to the Lantern Cinema Podcast, part of the Film Society for the Initiated, people who love to discuss cult, revival, and classic films and film history. Today we'll be discussing Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master. Joining me as always, Dustin and Hannah Harmson. And, for the first time ever, we have a guest.
Yay!
Elliot Imes.
Elliot Imes.
Hi, I'm honored. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here drinking iced coffee with everybody.
Yep.
Yes.
Great movie.
And I feel like for me, I can remember years back, we've been hanging out for quite a while now, and Elliot, I feel like, was one of the first people that I remember talking to who discussed how much he loved The Master.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you said at the end of the It Happened One Night episode that this was happening, I texted Dustin just like, hey, really excited about it. And then Dustin, maybe like not even really meaning it, was like, yeah, you can come on and be a guest. And I basically harassed my way onto the show.
Yes, I'm happy you're here. Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah. I feel like this is a movie that's had different lives. That I guess is a pun, no pun intended. This film has had many lives in terms of people's appreciation of it, and I feel like Elliot was one of the first people that I knew early on who had kind of recognized the brilliance of this movie. At least in terms of my or Elliot was endlessly curious about it.
Oh yeah, I definitely I loved it from the beginning. It not as much as not quite the same feeling I had after watching Phantom Thread, but that'd be for a different conversation. But yeah, I was spellbound by it and knew that it was something really special.
Yeah. Well, and Elliot let me borrow a book called Going Clear. However, I hadn't read it, but I still haven't had a chance to read it, but Hannah did.
I read it.
Yeah. So I guess for me, I'm curious for you, did it spark like an interest in Scientology? Like from just watching this movie, like you knew that there was, some elements of it?
Yeah, I probably didn't know as much about it when I saw the movie, because that was in 2012, right? And I didn't read the Going Clear book until 2016. Our good friend Dave Larson got it for me and Andrea as a baby shower gift right before our was born. And so reading that, it was just like, oh my god, this is insane. Which Hannah will get into, for sure.
Yes. So thank you. Where are we?
Should we do some quick news before
Yes,
we talk trailer?
news.
So my part's going to be brief here, but essentially, we're still doing a couple screenings in this season, pairing up with the Des Moines Film Society. Ooh. Next one is actually next week. So Thursday, May 23rd. We're
going to do everything in our power to get this podcast up before
yes.
So please come.
I'm resistant to say that, just in case. But we're doing Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which I'm super excited about. It's the first 18-plus screening. Not intentionally, but it's going to be a raunchy one. Very excited for that. We're going to pre-show talk from Dustin here.
Yeah, and I'm feeling really good. I have like a super good outline, and I feel really good about everything ready for that talk. We also have some really awesome stuff planned for the pre-show.
Yes. Good music. It'll be a fun event, so if you happen to hear this, check it out.
We've got to do some experimentation later this afternoon. Anyway, sorry.
And it's going to be Lincoln Cinema's birthday.
Wow.
2 years ago, Easy Rider. Now we're here.
I wish I knew the exact number of how many movies it's been. I don't want to waste the time thinking about it, but I feel really proud of the ones that we've done.
I'll count them up. It's quite a few at this point, which, yeah.
Is it like more than 30? Probably, right?
No.
So it's more than 30.
But it's more than 20. And then lastly, a little ray of light in my life right now. I'm going to be judging for the Interrobang Film Festival coming up along with the Des Moines Arts Festival. And it's just been so delightful to be able to watch all of these submissions because I'm getting to see a ton of movies from like Iran and different parts of the world and bigger filmmakers, smaller filmmakers. It's just so cool to be able to see that, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So that's something we'll definitely do a little reminder about. But June 28th through 30th is the Interrobang Film Festival downtown, and it's a really great opportunity to see a lot of stuff you might not normally have access to. So
there'll also be a special guest at that.
And
right?
There's going to be a special guest.
Has he not announced? They haven't announced yet?
We're not going to share the special guest.
Keeping it cool.
Keeping it cool with the lantern. So that's that. That's it for news.
Okay. Awesome.
I think we're good for a trailer?
Yeah. Okay. So should we jump in and see this thing?
Yeah, let's huddle around your phone.
Okay. The Master.
There will be people on the outside who will not understand the condition you men have. Now, upon your shoulders rests the responsibility of a post-war world.
And smile.
You can start a business, filling station, grocery, or hardware store. Get a few acres of land and raise some chickens.
You have a break coming?
10 minutes?
If the average civilian had been through the same stresses that you have been through, undoubtedly, they too would have developed the same nervous condition.
You must understand. You want to get the lady. How'd I get down here?
You're acting aggressive because you drank too much alcohol.
What do you do?
I am a writer, a doctor, a nuclear physicist, a theoretical philosopher. But above all, I am a man, just like you.
He's been writing all night. You seem to inspire something in him.
What we will do now will urge you toward existence within a group, society, or family.
Good science, by definition, allows for more than one opinion. Otherwise, you merely have the will of one man, which is the basis of cult.
And this is where we are at. To have to explain ourselves. For what? The only way to defend ourselves is to attack.
You know you should wake up, Val. Your father's speaking. You might learn something.
He's making all this up as he goes along. You don't see that?
I wonder how he got here and what he's after. Is it really all so easy that he just came across us?
You are an everlasting spirit, Freddy.
I don't believe you. You make this up. I know you're trying to calm me down, but just say something that's true!
Are you thoughtless in your remarks? Do your past failures bother you? Is your life a struggle? Is your behavior erratic? What are you running from?
He's dangerous. And he will be our undoing if we continue to have him here.
If we are not helping him, then it is we who have failed him.
Perhaps he's past help. Or insane.
I don't know about you guys, but I thought that was one of the most impressive. I mean, I don't know. I guess I've seen a lot of trailers, but I should say this: I really enjoyed that trailer.
Yeah, I like the way it was cut. It's visually striking as the actual movie is, and I'd never seen that trailer. I would go see that movie now.
Well, I was just thinking as I was watching it, if it was a trailer that just popped up. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge Paul Thomas Anderson fan, so I will always be really excited whenever those trailers come online. But that would be one where I would be like, this looks awesome. Mm-hmm. I would have been so excited. Yeah.
Well, I think we were. I think it might have been the first movie that we anticipated coming out after we'd gotten into PTA, wasn't it? Just you and speaking to me and Dustin.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing the trailer back in the day.
I think there was original, if I remember correctly, I think there was this original kind of teaser trailer where they just showed the churning water from the boat, that really beautiful blue, and it was, the master, and we knew very loosely what it was about, but I remember it being the first Paul Thomas Anderson movie that we were like anticipating and excited about.
Yes. Well, and of course, we'll get into all of this much later, but to a greater detail, but all of the press preceding this movie was all about how it was an expose on Scientology. I would have looked at that trailer and been like, Nah. Doesn't really seem like it's about that.
The only thing in the trailer is the line about that's the basis of a cult.
Yes.
And so if you knew that it was something to do with Scientology, that is the only connection. But other than that,
no.
What is this movie? Honestly, it doesn't really tell you what it's exactly about.
Well, and I wrote down two things, which Chris always supplies these wonderful pieces of paper that I never really use it, but I did this time. I wrote down the word feeling because I feel like that trailer totally encompasses the general feeling and tone of the movie, which is, I imagine is what you want with a trailer. And then another thing is I also think it does a really good job of hitting the motives and a lot of the kind of themes that are going to be explored through the movie. So I was really impressed with it. The gorgeous music, going between the Johnny Greenwood music and then kind of like the more standard kind of 50s fare that exists throughout that movie. Yeah, gorgeous. Loved it. Should we hit up the synopsis? Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. The Master follows a erratic, mentally and emotionally unstable, alcoholic World War II veteran drifting through life in California and drunkenly stumbling upon a boat. of Lancaster Dodd, the leader of The Cause, which is this cult-like religious movement. And then the next 120 minutes are about this group feeling attacked, growing, about the lead, Freddie Quill, trying to figure out what's true, what's real, what's fake, what are these processing sessions about, and just struggling to assimilate in a post-war world without grasping his own brain.
Yes.
And trying to figure out if you can live without a master.
Nice.
Which no one has done.
That was brilliantly put. I certainly wouldn't have been as concise with that. So nice job with that. I have for you. Did you kind of get all of that figured out from just watching it the first time, or was it like this has been through the weeks of your research that you could kind of pull it together?
Mostly figured out night one.
Yeah, not me. First time I saw it, I did not feel like that at all. Did you? What about you guys?
No, I was saying to you earlier how I often walk away from a movie being like, what the hell is that about?
Right, so like base plot stuff, but this is a movie that I still struggle trying to decide what PTA wanted to express with it, aside from just like raw emotion and these like interesting character dynamics. Like, what was the message here? Like, what was the story? And there's some of those takeaways I'm still trying to figure out. But
me and Hannah saw it together in 2012, though, right? We saw it at the Fleur and the whole thing, which is
But I don't think. I mean, if we talk about getting it, I think I didn't really start to understand it honestly until I'd read Going Clear, because when you hear that a movie's about Scientology, especially when that came out, that was like everybody talking about the aliens and the craziness and Tom Cruise jumping on cat and all that stuff. I think I expected to hear that. I expected to hear Lancaster Dodd going on about the theory and the history of human civilization and everything else. So I didn't walk away disappointed by that, but I walked away not feeling like, oh, this isn't as much about Scientology as I thought it was. But actually going into the history of L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, which we'll talk more about, it made me realize that it was so methodically about Scientology that point almost becomes superfluous. I feel like it's so clearly about Scientology, and there's so many things pulled from autobiographical aspects of L. Ron Hubbard's life that's almost just like a given, and now we can move on to the real meaning, which I think is more about Freddie Quill and his kind of quest for connection.
Yes, I think that's brilliantly well said. With this movie, obviously, like we're kind of discussing before it came out, so it came after There Will Be Blood, which was obviously a huge cinematic landmark that everyone was extremely excited for. So to have the follow-up to There Will Be Blood, there was just so much stuff in the press about this. It's going to be about Scientology. It's going to be about Scientology. And what I find interesting in this process, I've just listened to so many Paul Thomas Anderson interviews, and any time that the interviewers during this press junket would ask Paul Thomas Anderson specifically about Scientology, you can literally see it in his face how pissed he is to once again being asked about the Scientology thing.
In relation, Bruce Kirkland, Toronto Sun, in relation to this film, obviously there's a kind of elephant in the room that also has lawyers. When you deal with a cult and it's post-World War II, one name comes to mind, but I'm sure that you did not intend to do a documentary style feature film about Scientology. So can we deal with that word and then get rid of it, and then broaden that to?
Can we deal with the word?
Yeah, I don't know. You just did it perfectly. Good work.
Enough?
Yeah, you did it. Great.
Because there is a connection in general, but not in specifics. Is this what we're talking about?
Good. Okay.
So then, a better question would be, what is the impulse to deal with the idea of a cult, the development of a cult and what it means in a society, especially in particular after the upheavals of a war like World War II?
Well, I just want to tell you that I don't consider that we're dealing with a cult.
It seems like it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, obviously, all of that going into it helped aid in getting people's excitement of it, but to constantly have talk about Scientology, it's obvious to me that it got to be too much for him. And furthermore from that, and I think kind of what Hannah was saying, it's obvious to me through the research, recognizing that he used Scientology, specifically the early years of Scientology, as a huge source of inspiration. But boy, is there a lot more things that he was inspired by that he added to this movie that I think kind of adds to the people that are Ride and Die Master fans. It adds to the overall feeling of, if it was just about Scientology, I don't think anyone would care.
Or it would feel more pigeonholed as like some kind of movie that's attacking it, which in a way it kind of is.
Yeah.
But it's not, the whole point of it isn't like, look how dumb these people are.
Right.
In certain times you see how dumb they are, but
yeah.
But yeah, it's much more about this sort of human, all that stuff that we'll get into later. But I wonder if part of the reason that Paul Thomas Anderson didn't want to talk about Scientology stuff is just that it, like in Los Angeles especially, which I assume is where he lives, right? That like it is such, Scientology is so pervasive there in so many ways where it's like if you criticize it, they come after you. Maybe not where they're trying to ruin your life, but it just gets heat on you in a way that maybe just he always felt like wasn't worth it.
Yes.
I think about that.
Well, and
Don't
I think
defend, attack.
Yes. Well, and I think another, like elephant in the room within Paul Thomas Anderson history is obviously he has Tom Cruise in, right. I mean, certainly for me, one of my favorite roles of Tom Cruise's career is Frank T.J. Mackey. Yeah. And so, Magnolia wasn't that far removed from when this movie came out, 10 years or so,
And did Cruise ever talk about it? Do you know if he ever...
Well, I read that he screened this privately for Tom Cruise. Wow. And that apparently, like, the one scene that Tom Cruise mentioned he had a problem with is when Lancaster Dodd's son, which we also heard in the trailers, like, he's just making this up as he goes, Because apparently L. Ron Hubbard Jr. also had issues with his dad and, like, said similar things. So that was, like, the one thing that he's like, I didn't love this scene.
Yeah, because it exposes your whole religion, dude. That's why I get it, but,
I think something else today, I was just reading this article in IndieWire where Paul Thomas Anderson says, so this is just from 2018, he definitively, so this is post Phantom Thread, everything, he says definitively that The Master is his favorite movie that he made. And he said, I don't think it will change the amount of emotion I put into it and they put into it, they being Phil Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix and Amy Adams. I'm not sure it's entirely successful, but that's fine with me. It feels right. It feels unique to me. Cool. And I think that will do a pretty good job of kind of bringing us into kind of some of the specifics with Paul Thomas Anderson. Toy boat. Anyways,
Unique New York.
I think one thing about Paul Thomas Anderson, his movies, it's like for people like me and Hannah and other people that love Paul Thomas Anderson movies, you'll defend it to the end. Whereas like people who have a struggle with getting into his movies is so much of his movies is about the feeling that you get from watching it. And I think The Master is the maybe out of all of them, the biggest example of that.
I even just had that thought coming over here today where, as getting ready for the podcast, we've been watching Let There Be Light, which you'll probably talk more about, Dustin. Yeah. And we've been listening to the music, and we've been reading about Scientology. And I feel like this one, even more than any other of his movies, it just immerses you in this whole world and this setting of post-World War II. I thought about this whole movie reminds me of the story, J.D. Salinger's short story, Perfect Day for Banana Fish. Oh, man. Have you guys read that one? No. Oh, it's just, I don't know that it was an influence or anything. I've never heard anything about it, but I just keep coming back to it because it's also about kind of this damaged man after World War II and how he copes. And I just feel like this movie digs into that feeling so much more than, almost any of his others too. I didn't make it like he did, but I also recognize that it's special the same way he did.
Yes, absolutely. I think that short story could almost be read as like a pairing with the film.
Right.
Think?
Well, and J.D. Salinger's life which
Yes.
reflects a lot of that too. So
yeah, and if anyone's interested, the documentary about Salinger is fascinating, and that can really dig into all that. I did see this on Screen Prism. This is a series of videos that they make where they kind of take directors and they kind of break them down, and they have one on characteristics of Paul Thomas Anderson films, and I think this would be a really great kind of jumping off point. So they have it listed down to 9 specific things. Number 1, characters are out of time. Often characters are placed in periods of time in a huge amount of upheaval. Characters often feel isolated by all of the change that's occurring. So I'm just going to say these, and then we can all, kind of add what we'd like. They are often, mostly, sneaky period pieces. They take place in very specific time periods. However, the stories are so specific to the time that you almost don't even recognize that, this movie takes place in the 50s, because you get so sucked into the story that you're experiencing, with that.
Yeah, I don't think about, when I watched this movie, I didn't think about the costumes and the cars they had to use or anything like that. It's just, you're just in the world and you just go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And often what adds to that is the time periods that he chooses are so, they haven't been on screen that often. So for instance, this is a perfect example. There's not too many movies. I don't even know if I can think of another one that has to do with 1950.
Yeah.
This is the year, this is right after World War II. It's such a specific time period. Inherent Vice with being 1970.
I like that. I haven't really thought about that, because a lot of times when I watch period pieces, I'll be like, how did they get that many Model T cars? How did they make the street look that way?
Well, and also being a period piece, but like geographically covering a lot of ground.
Mm-hmm.
Like we see a little bit of an island in the Pacific, California, we're in the East Coast a bunch, they're in Arizona for a little while, and
yes.
England, like there's a lot that we
tricks on your
see.
mind. Yeah. Well, and going back to that first thing about the idea of being isolated by your time period, that sums up this movie perfectly.
Right.
Obviously, Freddie Quell is just like destroyed by the idea of, World War II is over, my purpose in this life is kind of done, I don't know how to, make sense of that. Next, expressive syncopated scores. I think that's obvious. Often, the scenes that are happening are accompanied by scores that don't really match the imagery, which kind of gives it that feeling of, I feel uncomfortable here. I'm thinking of Punch Drunk Love during that whole.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to do that because I just saw that recently for the first time, and there's like the scenes where what's Adam Sandler's character's name?
Barry.
Where he's running around and because he's stressed about the phone, and the music in that was just panic-inducing.
Mm-hmm.
I almost couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
Kind of clicky, syncopated.
Obviously, There Will Be Blood. There's so many moments in that it's just like.
Thanks, Johnny Greenwood.
Johnny Greenwood, our guy.
So what is he? What is Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead? If anybody doesn't know, what in this movie? Like, what's his contribution musically? Like, what parts is he doing? Like the strings? Is he doing those things?
Yeah, he basically arranged all of that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Specifically, and we might not get to it, so we might as well say it now. When they started filming this movie, Paul Thomas Anderson has such a specific way that he attacks music. Like often he'll have, while he's like filming and being on the set, he will listen to music from the people who are making the music for it. So John Bryan and Punch Drunk Love specifically, like really made specific rhythmic things that Paul Thomas Anderson would come up to him and be like, I want something that sounds like chugga-chugga. And then like he will actually be filming it because he's thinking so much of the music, what it's going to be like as he's doing it. For this movie specifically, he just called up Johnny Greenwood and said, hey man, listen, I really like clarinets. So this movie, like if you listen, like there is a lot of the percussive kind of stuff I think of. Well, obviously we just listened to the trailer. There's a lot of that score in that. But then also there's just all of these kind of woodwind sounds. It's actually, to me, reminiscent of, what's the Altman movie? Is it Three Women? What's that movie called?
Three Women?
Is that what it is? Three Women? With Shelley Duvall and... Yeah, Three Women. It kind of reminds me of... Sorry, I was trying to make sure.
Three Women.
Characteristic number 4, looks at religion, but more specifically, he's interested in how beliefs influence his characters. So obviously with this movie, you know, and then I'm also thinking of There Will Be Blood and you know,
some things of Phantom Thread and you know the afterlife. His mom, still being part of
he doesn't find it spooky at all.
But even this movie, I think that might once again go back to the idea of the Scientology piece. It's not like it's like a breakdown of here exactly is what Scientology is. It's more about how is it affecting his characters throughout.
Because they're actually really vague about a lot of the causes' beliefs. Like I feel like there's specific moments where it's like, here's this thing about past lives and time travel kind of stuff. But a lot of it is just like the general like vibe and feeling, and then the things that the cause does, and like the sessions and stuff, more so than like the specifics of what's in book 1 and 2 that Lancaster Dodd has written. Like they don't just tell us what those pages say.
And when it gets kind of specific, like when he has the woman on the couch and the guy, you know, the guy kind of challenges him, it almost has that raw nerve feeling. When they're actively talking about it and participating in it, it gets really intense really fast. And I think it like almost exposes this world they're part of.
Oh yeah, totally, absolutely.
Creates some cool tension.
I love that part.
I texted you this morning, Dustin, the big curse word from that scene that he...
Pig fuck! You know, my favorite part about that scene is, okay, so he says this outrageous... First off, I've never heard anyone in real life ever say that. But we should all make a conscious, concerted effort to bring it back.
I think whenever you have just like a really delightful combination of curse words, it's so... I don't know, it's therapeutic.
Yes.
I think it's so like calling someone pig fuck. It makes me
Is he calling him a pig fuck, or is it just sort of like a god damn it? Like
I think it's more of just like a general expletive. I think all the time of this time where we were in New York City.
Oh, love it!
And
please tell the story.
This woman was yelling at a cop, and
which is awesome. Just a wild thing.
My mind goes to this weekly. And in the course of her yelling at him, she called him a stupid piece of cocklick.
Which is just poetry.
It's beautiful.
A piece of it.
Yeah. Cocklick as a concept.
In the movie itself, when he says pig fuck too, like he says it and you can see on his face immediately that feeling of like, God damn it.
Because he's in this very, hoity-toity, proper world where they've let him in, and he, oh no, did I just ruin it?
Yes.
By showing how much of a rageful weirdo I am.
Yes.
And it might be like the first time we see like a dent in his armor.
Yes.
Because he's been just like very like proper and intellectual to that point.
It's the only time that anybody has pushed him on any of it up to that point in the movie. And really, because later Laura Dern's character very politely asks him, and even then he snaps at her when she's like, does this mean we're just making everything up? Imagine?
Yes. But let's be real, that guy was being an asshole. He showed up at that party.
Oh, he knew. He knew.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm gonna make a point next time I go to McDonald's and get some chicken selects. If they're missing one, I'm just gonna go, pig fuck! Anyway. Sorry. Okay.
Calm down.
Number 5.
Forgot there was a list involved.
Yeah. Dynamic camera. I think that one's pretty obvious. Especially early on in Paul Thomas Anderson's career with Boogie Nights sticks out to me. It's like he's throwing every fucking shot that he can into a movie. And those.
I think like Punch Drunk Love.
Oh,
like,
man.
Iris.
Yeah, love it. He's always using all the tricks that he knows. As he matures and gets older later in the films, one that sticks out to me right now is Inherent Vice. These super slow close-ups just leading to people talking. Like, it's kind of changed, but at one point that was a big point.
Like Altman.
Oh, yeah, he's
kind
totally...
of that Altman influence, the really slow zoom in on something.
And then parts where he's not doing anything, like where both Lancaster and Freddy are in the jail cells next to each other. That shot doesn't move at all.
No.
There's so much happening in it that it's just hold on this for 3-4 minutes, and it's brilliant.
And boy, he doesn't need to move.
No.
Good thing he didn't.
Yeah.
Who knows what he would have missed? Number 6, visual prowess. He knows a lot about the technical side of filmmaking. What's interesting about Paul Thomas Anderson, entirely self-taught. He is a part of a generation of filmmakers that are dubbed the VCR generation because they learned everything from going to video stores and, you know, just getting as many movies as they can. And specifically, like once they started making DVDs, and in Paul Thomas Anderson's case, Laserdiscs, he was a big fan of Laserdiscs. Once they started adding the film commentaries, he just learned so much shit from that. And that to me is just like so inspiring that he could even do that. Human connection, number 7. Human existence is the one thing that can help us rise to a higher plane of existence. You often in these movies see what happens if someone does not make a human connection. The Master in a nutshell. Don't you think? Yeah. These last two I can do real fast. Number 8, surrogate family is probably the most talked about things in all of Paul Thomas Anderson, primarily in a lot of the movies, is this idea of a surrogate family. In the case of The Master, obviously that happens with Freddie Quell, you know, going from one ship to another to the whole causes thing, and he's just a part of that family immediately. So you could think of Boogie Nights, obviously. And then lastly, the goal is accepting ourselves. Often when the films are done, that's what the whole movie is all about. Trying to accept yourself, or the lack of being able to accept yourself, which I think you could certainly make the case for with The Master. When it ends, he doesn't quite have it all figured out. It's not like it's like at the end of Magnolia where it's like this, you know, I accept myself for being this damaged person. It's entirely ambiguous as to what's going to happen to Freddie Quell.
But he has like gotten a little bit of what he wanted. He is just this like horny dude all the time, and like he's like finally gotten over kind of this like old lost love. He's not just dry humping sand. He actually has found somebody willing to sleep with him. But then he's like kept a little bit of stuff from the cause, because during that scene he's like asking some of the processing questions, but in like a slightly playful way, in like an interesting kind of weird scene. So at least for me, I feel like he's like progressed slightly. It has like a slightly better grasp on like who he is. He's gotten the one basic thing that he's been wanting, and then seems to have taken away like a little bit from the cause, and not like totally disowned everything he had been told during that time.
To me, it almost seems like once it gets to that scene, it's like all of the things he learned from the cause, it's like a tattoo on his brain.
Yeah.
You know, it's like here he is in this really intimate moment. He's like, you know, having sex with a lady that he picked up from a bar. But now it's not just about the sex. It's like he remembers all of this. It's like coming up to the surface, and in the moment of, you know, he was such a poon hound, for lack of a better word, throughout the whole movie.
Oh, there is no better term.
So it's interesting that comes up at that point. But
he's making an actual, like, intimate, I mean, obviously literally intimate, but just he's making an intimate actual connection with somebody. And it's probably the only movie that I've ever seen that ends on a sex scene.
Well, does it end? Is the last scene him laying with the naked woman?
That's the
the sands.
That
yeah,
is the
that's right.
Shot. He's found this woman that he can have sex with. He will let him do that. But
she's a very patient young lady.
She is. She's dealing with some nonsense. But then it immediately cuts from that to the final shot being him laying down next to the sand lady again, and then it ends.
Which therein lies the ambiguity. I was just saying I was going to have a problem with this word. Can you say
ambiguity?
Ambiguity.
That's the problem that the people have with this movie, right? That's what it is. It's that feeling right there. What am I supposed to take from this?
Yeah. Anything you want, baby.
Well, and maybe that's the brilliance of it, right? Like maybe within that lies the idea of there's no answers to it. It's all the things that you need to take from this film are on the screen for the entire 2 hours and 10 minutes or whatever it's on there.
Yeah, it's 138 minutes.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Let There Be Light.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of influences, because I think that movie is a huge influence on this. And Dustin can maybe talk a little more about the history of that one, but it's John Huston just documenting.
It's essentially at a VA hospital.
Okay, yeah. So soldiers coming back from World War II, and I think that documentary is similarly ambiguous because it shows these really like very damaged men in very delicate situations, but it doesn't necessarily tell us how to feel about them. And in fact, the government, even though they tell. I mean, I don't want to do this justice.
Yeah, sure.
Funded his documentary, correct?
Well, here. Okay, so this film, this documentary, came out in 1946. Let There Be Light, John Huston. It's a part of a greater thing that was happening at the time, where the United States Army essentially would hire film directors to make, war movies, essentially. Yeah. So most of them primarily are just like the kind of classic things that you've seen, like boom, gunshot off in the distance, we're coming back, come on boys, that kind of movie. Well, I don't know what exactly came up John Huston's butt exactly to make this movie, but it's exactly like Hannah's saying. It's a VA. It's all about going into a VA hospital and filming the psychiatrist and the therapist working with the soldiers that are obviously,
At the time, they would have just called shell-shocked, but we know now it's just intense PTSD.
And it's no joke. You watch this movie. Me and Hannah watched it. I did make it through, but we got, I think, together, 10 minutes in, and Hannah was like, it's too intense.
It's hard to watch. Yeah. And it's supposed to be made as almost propaganda for the United States, but they ended up really suppressing the movie for decades because they realized 30 years.
They hid it for 30 years.
So now we can see it, but at the time they just realized that, actually seeing these men coming back in the form they were after the war wasn't necessarily very inspiring.
Yeah,
because
it's kind of the opposite.
Right. So there's some really, tender but very hard to watch moments. It's hard to see these psychiatrists, I don't know, just...
They don't seem very kind.
No, and at the time, especially what I imagine, there's that machismo thing, these men aren't supposed to be crying, and so there's some of that, having him, the psychiatrist say, it's okay to show a display of emotion every once in a while, and, just very, calmly. It's not very comforting, but it's a really good look at what war does to people, which wasn't really super accessible. Before, I think about, Vietnam, how that kind of became, a televised war. You actually see what people experienced and dealt with and how they process those things after the fact.
And I'd like to jump off here where Hannah's talking right now. We're talking about Paul Thomas Anderson and the way that he makes movies. I think the thing I take the most excitement and just interest in this movie is seeing how someone can have such a vast array of influences and how they condense them to make something so new and interesting. So we talked about Scientology early on. That was the jumping off point with this film. Looking at the early years of Dianetics and the idea of people coming back from the war and how it could possibly be that they come back and, everything about the world's changed and, how am I going to find meaning? And, we're all supposed to go on and progress, but how do we do this? Our lives are destroyed. So he started off with the early years of Dianetics and he got stuck. There came a point where it wasn't enough. He couldn't really find the heart of what am I trying to say. And he stumbled upon There Will Be Light on YouTube. He just happened to see it, and he said after seeing it, he couldn't stop watching it because it was so obvious to him that this is what I need to make. Specifically, and I'd like to include the clip here of him discussing it himself to better explain it, but specifically looking at the men's faces. When you watch this documentary we're talking about, obviously this is audio so you can't see me, but they are just shaking. Mm-hmm. And there's some people that just have these crazy it will scare you. Seeing it.
You just gave me chills.
It's intense.
It's very raw.
And specifically, there's a moment in it that, this is the first thing I showed Hannah and we were both so moved by it, but there's one scene in it where this African-American soldier comes and he sits down and he's so composed. He's such a well thought out gentleman. I don't really know any way to say it, but he's talking about what, why are you here? And do you remember exactly what his words were, or pretty close?
He talks about seeing, his wording was seeing a photograph of his sweetheart.
It was brought upon by a letter from my sweetheart.
Yeah, I think in your profession you call it nostalgia. Brought on by a photograph of my sweetheart. And he just goes on to talk about how they've been through so much together and how much and he's just crying, and I said, there's that sheen of you're supposed to be manly and not emotional.
And he cries and he just goes, I'm sorry, I can't do this right now. And he walks away, and then the therapist's like, come back here. But through that scene, Paul Thomas Anderson saw it and thought, that's the entire movie.
And it sounds like he kind of used that scene then for early in the movie.
There's elements throughout The Master where he takes, and he admittedly says this, word from word dialogue from this movie. We were just watching the trailer, and there's the line about most of you, people have never experienced the likes of this. You want you go on and
open a hardware store, get some chickens.
That's literally from the movie. It's literally from the movie. So at this point, I would like to include the young man in this dialogue that really brought this whole thing on.
Have you been getting along?
Well, fairly well, sir.
Mm-hmm. You overseas?
Yes, sir.
Where?
We were in France, and then we went to Germany.
In where?
France to Germany.
And what outfit were you with?
I was with Headquarters Detachment, 50th Quartermaster Battalion, Mobile.
Mm-hmm. I see your PFC.
At present, sir.
Mm-hmm. You had to go in the hospital.
Sir?
You had to go in the hospital.
Twice, sir.
It says here on your record from overseas that you had headaches and that you had crying spells.
Yes, sir. I believe in your profession it's called nostalgia.
In other words, homesickness.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
It was induced when shortly before the war I received a picture of my sweetheart.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I can't continue.
That's all right. Rick.
Yes, sir.
Come on, sit down a minute. Now, a display of emotion is all right.
I'm not doing this deliberately, so please believe me.
I do believe you. A display of emotion is sometimes very helpful.
Yeah, I hope so, sir.
Sure, it gets it off your chest. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have been returned as a patient if there wasn't something upsetting you.
Yes, sir.
Well, now, you say you had received a letter from your...
Not a letter, sir, a photograph.
A photograph, yes. Well, what about that now?
Well, sir, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm very much in love with my sweetheart. She has been the one person that gave me a sense of importance, and that through her cooperation with me, we were able to surmount so many obstacles.
As the weeks pass, the therapy begins to show its effect. The shock and stress of war are starting to wear off. For these men are blessed with the natural regenerative powers of youth. Now they are living less in the past and more in the present. Sometimes they think of the future. War years must be put aside and the responsibilities of peace must be considered. A man might open a filling station or a hardware store, or he can buy a few acres of land and raise some chickens. He might even go back to school.
So talk to me about the first time you saw Let There Be Light.
Well, like I said, it was on YouTube. And, I'd never seen anything quite like it. Just, I guess with the first film, which I think I watched at the same time, taking nothing away from it, but because it's a great film, but you've seen explosions off in the distance and the camera rattle. I was familiar with that stuff, and it had already kind of, it had already maybe become desensitized to it in a sort of terrible way, but this was something, these close-ups of these fellas, and hearing them talk, and long takes. It was not battle footage. It was obviously the aftermath of the battles, and it was just no wonder they didn't want anybody to see it. And it was just a great, at the time, was writing the master, and you can only go so far when you get when you're trying to sort of get in the head of another time. And you sort of get hungry for more. Films of that period don't do it, but seeing a documentary from that period and something that's laid so bare was, I watched it again and again and again and again. And it was at a time when I was writing it where I was feeling pretty good about what I had, but I just felt like something was missing. And suddenly you get lucky enough to kind of discover something, and it just kind of opens up for you maybe a story that you're working on, and that's what that did. Seeing Let There Be Light did for me.
Was it that sense because in that movie, unlike any John Huston movie, even unlike Under the Volcano, there's just a sense of these guys being completely lost in their own bodies.
Perfectly said. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny too to see this kind of happy ending put on it. Which you could feel, I don't know. I know he had a rascally sense of humor, not that he was applying it to this film, but you could feel maybe he was like he was saying, well, I just put a little swell of music and say that everything's okay, and maybe I can get away with it, you know, as if and the War Department probably said there's no swell of music big enough, you know, to make it okay what you've done. But yeah. The fella, the black guy's talking about his wife, you know, that letter, it just doesn't get any more harrowing. Or so seeing somebody like that, so vulnerable and so naked, you just never saw that sort of fellas from that era that came back. You just never saw them kind of bearing their souls, and I'd never seen anything like that.
Actually, like, that scene is the one part of the documentary that I did watch, because you shared this with us yesterday, and I didn't sit down and watch the full 50-ish minutes, but I did just watch those few with him. And it immediately reminded me of the first time when Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman sit down for the first processing session, which is still one of the more, like, memorable scenes for me, just how intense that became super quickly. And like the difference there is instead of a psychologist, it's
that's interesting. Yeah,
I don't even know how to describe. Yeah, who says he's a psychologist and a writer and all these things, a nuclear physicist.
Yeah,
and then having like strict rules and restrictions on it, like you can't blink, you have to answer all these questions, and just like making it so rigid and harsh the way they're having that conversation.
But how
really intense
Freddie is, he's like so willing and like invested in participating.
It didn't take him long to kind of like flip the switch, because at first like, oh, what's this? Sure, I'll just like talk to you, I guess. And then he just becomes so invested in like not blinking and like punishing himself when he is blinking, just like gets through it.
The question that makes it flip is when Lancaster asks him, does he ask him if you've ever had sex with someone in your family?
So bizarre, yeah.
Which is like, it's like the fourth question or something.
Yeah.
And
how many times have you?
Yeah. Oh, God.
Your auntie?
Yeah. I just, that scene. Yeah, but it's the not blinking that I think makes that scene even more stressful. Is that you are like imagining yourself trying to do it, and so it just makes you just get in it. You get in Freddy's shoes right away.
I think it's a sign of intelligence on my part, but I've seen this movie a ton of times, and just the last time that we all watched it together, I was like, holy shit, he's not blinking. Yeah. Like, I had never considered that part of it, and then I experienced the feeling that you guys are talking about of like, ugh.
He's squirming, he's like, shifting his seat, he's trying so hard, and why? He's only met this guy, like a day or two ago, but he's already like, I'm going to do anything I can for this man.
Yes. He's so desperate for connection.
Could you answer the next series of questions without blinking your eyes?
Yes.
Without fear and hesitation, answer as quickly as you can.
Sure.
Starting now, you're not to blink. If you blink, we go back to the start. Infringement. You blinked. Starting now, you're not to blink. If you blink, we go back to the start. Do you often think about how inconsequential you are?
No.
Do you believe that God will save you from your own ridiculousness?
No.
Have you ever had intercourse with someone inside your family?
Yes.
Have you ever had intercourse with someone inside your family?
Yes.
Who?
My auntie.
Have you killed anyone?
No.
Maybe.
Not me.
Have you killed anyone?
No.
How many times did you have intercourse with your aunt?
3 times.
Where's your aunt now?
I don't know.
Would you like to have intercourse with her again?
No.
Do you regret this?
No.
Where's your mother?
I don't know, Lily.
Infringement. Back to the start.
Okay.
Do Do you often think about how inconsequential you are?
Yes.
Do you believe that God will save you?
No.
Have you ever had sex with a member of your family?
Yes.
Are you lying?
No.
Who?
My Auntie Bertha.
Where's your aunt now?
I don't know, maybe home.
Are you lying?
No.
Are you a liar?
Yes.
Have you killed anyone?
Yes.
Who?
Japs in the war.
Do you regret this?
No.
What are you running from?
Maybe hurt a man, I think. Maybe he's dead, I don't know.
Where?
In Salinas, he stole a batch of my booze and he drank it.
Does this booze you make poison?
Not if you drink it, smart.
Are you trying to poison me?
No.
Where's your father?
Dead.
How did he die?
Drunk.
Where's your mother? Where's your mother?
Loony bin.
She's psychotic.
Yes.
What is the name of your aunt?
Bertha.
How did you come to have sex with your auntie Bertha?
I was drunk and she looked good.
And you did it again and again?
Yes.
Have you ever had bad thoughts about Master Peggy?
Yes.
What did you think?
I thought you were fools.
Am I a fool to you?
No, sir.
If you were locked in a room for the rest of your life, who would be in there with you?
Doris.
Who's Doris?
Best girl I ever met. Girl I'm gonna marry one day.
Is she in Lynn?
Yes.
Lynn, Massachusetts?
Yes, sir.
Why aren't you with her?
I'm an idiot.
Why aren't you with that lovely girl?
I got no reason. I'm a fool.
Do you love Doris?
Yes.
Is she the love of your life?
Yes, sir.
Why aren't you with her?
I don't know.
Yes, you do. Tell me why you're not with her if you love her so much.
I told her I'd come back and I never went back, and now I gotta get back to her.
Why don't you go back?
I don't know.
Why don't you go
I
back?
don't know.
Close your eyes.
Talk about Doris Day.
Yes.
Um,
Timely, she just passed away this last week.
Yeah, it's real Doris Day. He keeps going back to this idea of his sweetheart Doris and how that seems to be the one real connection he had pre-war, and now he's just, I think, trying to find that and place that love or that acceptance with somebody else. And Lancaster Dodd comes along, who's just like L. Ron Hubbard, really charming and interesting and, compelling for some people. And yeah, he's just in it right away. He's willing to play that game.
Mm-hmm. It just shows the power that Lancaster had over people, and that is I think one of the big parallels to Scientology of what obviously this weird writer was able to do and get people to follow him on these boats, and then do all these things. He was obviously just a hugely magnetic person and personality.
Yes. If it's okay, I wanted to have one little fact about this. You guys talked about the Doors thing, and I read there's this amazing book. It's by Jason Spurb. Let me make sure I get the title right.
It's a great last name.
It's an awesome book, though. Blossoms and Blood, Postmodern Media Culture and the Films of Paul Thomas Anderson. It's just like... It's like a totally full of film analysis of all of the movies. And it ends right at The Master. And The Master had just came out like a week before finishing the book, so he just has like general thoughts. One thing that he talks about is specifically the name Doris. So at the end of it, there's that point where she says, Freddie Quell goes back to check on Doris. And as you're saying, Doris is the person that brought on this nostalgia for him, and he's always on this quest of looking for her. She has red hair, which hopefully we'll get into that later. So he's looking for Doris, and then he goes to find out that she's been married now, and the last name to Jim Day, and Day's the last name. And then he goes, Doris Day. Like the actress? This Jason Spurb is saying that the reason that he thinks that Paul Thomas Anderson made a point to really point that off is at this point, the Doris character, Doris Day at that time, would have been known synonymous with being like the idealized girl next door, the movie star. She's now she's transcended to this point of being assimilated in life in a way that he will never be. And there's like that moment that he like recognizes like, oh, she's now a part of this.
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting...
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. We're talking about influence. Another thing that influenced this film, and this is fascinating to me, it is this movie called Baraka. This Ron Frick movie, which I had never heard of. It happened in 1992. But the opening scene of Baraka. Okay, so what it is essentially is it's a nature movie. What's that show on Netflix now, Planet Earth or something like that? It's very reminiscent of that. Just like, here's the world and how interesting it is. Primarily, it's like a 2-hour movie where there's no talking. It's just really ethereal, kind of cool music that scared our daughter when we watched it together. And then kind of just jumping all over the place. But it starts off with, I don't know, it must be in some, it's in the mountains.
Snow monkey.
It's a snow monkey, yeah. It's just the snow monkey in the water, just as calm as can
Have
be.
you guys seen snow monkeys in hot springs?
No.
That's what it is.
It's the best.
Okay.
It's the best.
Paul Thomas Anderson happened to see this movie, and he saw this snow monkey sitting in the water, kind of closing his eyes, so peaceful. And he was like, that's my Freddie Quell character.
Wow.
So the beginning of The Master, there's the part where they show him with the helmet, and he's just like sitting there and like in the water or whatever. It's like a direct copy.
Talk about the first time you saw Baraka and how that really kind of moved you.
I like, in general, movies that are just pictures and music or something like that, and that Baraka just kind of really did it for me. I remember the first shot, it's a monkey in the snow, and he's falling asleep. It is absolutely hypnotizing. One of the best things I've ever seen, and I showed it to him one day, and I said, and he just loved it too. I said, let's try and do that.
So we're talking about a movie that is influenced by Scientology, clarinets, snow monkeys, John Huston. I mean, it's fascinating, the influences that come from it.
It's not just a Scientology.
No. And specifically, Baraka was also filmed in the 70mm format, which would make sense for a nature documentary, but that's another big thing that people talk about with this movie.
Because The Master is shot in 65mm, and it's beautiful. Like I said, the scene of the churning water, I always think of that and connect it with this film. It's like, but yeah, it's not necessarily what someone would make as a first choice for shooting a movie like that. So
and
creates a cool aesthetic.
In an interview, he actually stated the reason he chose that was, inside of him, he knew it was almost like funny that this movie is primarily just interviews in a room. But the idea of using equipment that's not quite right, that was what was exciting about it to him. Like, let's get these big ass cameras that fill up a whole room. And thank God he did. It's a beautiful movie.
Yeah, it really is.
In that way. So, yeah, we talked a little bit about the influences. Anyone have the actors used in the film?
I mean, for me, and I'm sure this is how everybody else feels, but it was especially watching it last night. I just missed Philip Seymour Hoffman so much. It hurt me. Like, it physically hurt me at certain times. The scene a little bit toward the end where he releases the book and he comes out to give the speech, and when everybody's applauding for him, like, I started tearing up. And people who know me know that I cry at like everything. But still, he is. I don't know if I've ever seen a performance like this, and I know that's sort of a Patrick Tate Fleming statement. Like, it's the best
I think you're right. I think you're right.
But sorry, Patrick. But it's really how I felt watching it last night. Probably watching it for the first time and sitting here now is I just don't think anybody has done what he did in that movie in the way that it's every facial movement, it's every choice he makes, it's the way he speaks, it's the times when he lets his accent slip a little bit in the jail cell scene, which I keep coming back to, but he loses his accent a bit, and when he's just screaming at him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's intentional or not. I think it is, because I think his accent is a put on.
Yes.
The character is doing that accent, because it's like kind of a British accent, kind of not. But it's the accent of a guy who thinks he's really important.
Yeah.
But in that scene when he's yelling at Freddy, he lets it slip, and he's just a dude just screaming at a person who he loves very much, but is deeply frustrated about.
And I'm fucking done with you.
Yeah. He doesn't have the fancy man accent anymore.
The Monopoly. Yeah. The Monopoly Orson Welles. Yeah.
Penny bags.
Yeah.
But you guys can say more, but he was so good in that movie, and it just sucks that he's
It's a
not
disaster.
Here. It really is. And knowing the story of how he had quit opioids for a really long time, and I don't remember, he had like an injury or something, and that's why he got back on the opioids. Whatever it is.
One of those sad, just terrible.
And whenever I say this, of like, it's so sad thinking about all the stuff we lost. It's like, well, we don't want to minimize his family and his children. That's the greatest loss. that he's not there for them. But yeah, I mean, he was only 47 or something.
Oh my God!
Think of all the stuff he could have done over the next 25, however many years he decided to work. It's just such a loss. But yeah, in this movie especially, I think it's his best performance by far.
Do you agree? I do too, actually.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he's just incredible.
Even those little moments of, Dustin and I are married, so we talk about a lot. So all my stories reference back to him, but we talk a lot about, like, pick a point. We even made a joke, like, years ago. We were on a jet ski.
Yeah.
It was like, pick a point on the jet ski, the motorcycle scene. We talk a lot about when Philip Seymour Hoffman is watching Freddie Quell go away, and just like that kind of moment where you can just see on his face through those micro expressions. Yeah, it's like he conveys everything about that scene so simply, and like the hurt in his face when he's yelling for Freddie, and you obviously wouldn't be able to hear him. It's just so well acted.
Well, during the NPR Terry Gross interview during the press junket of this, she was specifically asking him questions about Philip Seymour Hoffman. And she was just like, there seems like there's moments in the movie where he blushes. Is it possible that he knows how to make himself blush? And Paul Thomas Anderson's like, listen, I cannot explain to you like how he does the things that he does, but if there's one person that could possibly have figured out how to make themselves blush, it's him. And I think, I'm glad we're talking about him because, it's just amazing. And obviously, Joaquin Phoenix in this movie is so physical and aggressive and scary in this that performance really sticks out.
My back hurts just thinking.
Yeah.
But once we see him just like lose it the first time, just be unhinged, then I was just like on the edge of my seat the rest of the movie because it felt like that character could flip anytime.
Yes.
And sometimes he did and sometimes he didn't, but between just like the physicality of the performance and then the music, sometimes like it felt like it could just happen to anybody he interacted with. But really the one time when there's like one of the maybe two times where there's like violence, it's like off screen, like when he just barges into that guy's apartment. So even without like showing exactly what happened there, I was just like afraid for any of the rest of the
that
movie.
scene that you don't see what he does to the guy makes it more ominous and scary. What to you is the first time that he flips and loses it?
Man, I'm trying to think of this like the chronological order of all the stuff. I can't remember the first instance.
Would you say it's when he's in the department store and the guy that he's taking a picture of?
Yes,
that's the first.
That's totally it. That's
Freddie,
totally it. When we just see him at Sears and he's just a photographer there and taking pictures of kids and is like fine, and then he's just photographing this dude, and for whatever reason, that's the time when he just like gets all up in his face.
The thing I read was saying how the thing that maybe makes him flip is that he asked the guy, "Do you have a family? Is this for your wife?" And that's because that's what he really wants. He wants to start this family.
And Jason Spurb in this book talks a lot about that in terms of media as being a leitmotif that exists throughout this. What is photography? Sorry, I just gave it away. What is
the answer is photography.
Yeah. What's the one thing he does do afterwards?
What is photography?
He's a photographer, so his whole job is to give people their idealized version of themselves.
But he can't get it.
He can't get it. It's the one thing that he can offer to Lancaster Dodd when it's all said and done. I mean, it's a fascinating.
Yeah, at the end when he asks him, like, "Do you need pictures?" and Peggy, "We don't need pictures." You know?
Yes.
Like, we don't need your
They're done with
talent.
it. Yeah. Further. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean.
Oh, just Elliot mentioning that, like, we don't need your one talent. That's a really, especially.
Yeah, because doesn't he crying like, I can take pictures?
Yeah, we don't want the one thing you can offer us.
Yeah. It's sad. Furthermore, going back on Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in this book, he also talks about how, specifically referring to his words, that he speaks are neither true nor false, but rather draw their power from the effect they have on the audience, who willingly find in them the personal affirmation they seek. So all of Lancaster Dodd's, the way that he speaks, he speaks like in this weird kind of affected, poetic, kind of strange...
Like extended metaphors about dragons.
And you whip it around. It's just fascinating. And just to think that an actor could even be able to do that. How could he do? You know what I mean? Like, I do know that he did draw in terms of his voice. He did listen to a lot of Orson Welles. That's where he drew the interest there. I also know that Paul Thomas Anderson and Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix, for that matter, thought that Lancaster Dodd was like the most funny character he ever created. Out of all of Paul Thomas Anderson's characters.
Just like breaking out into song kind of randomly at different times.
We fought against the day and we won. Yeah. All of that. All of that stuff. And, you know, he was surprised that when it came out that people didn't think it was like hysterical, because he thinks that movie is just crazy.
I know I said this earlier, but I really think this movie was just poorly branded in a lot of ways. The fact that all you heard was Scientology, that's all that PTA was asked about at these press junkets. I can see why he would have gotten annoyed by that, because it's a sliver of the movie, but there's so much depth to it outside of that I think, like I said, I personally missed for years because I kept looking for like, aliens. You know, what were these crazy Scientologists believing? And I think if you're looking for that, you're not going to find the real feeling and heart of the movie.
Yeah. Well, and at this point too, and the humor. At this point, Philip Seymour Hoffman had been in 6 of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, so they had like a crazy relationship.
And he crushes it every single one.
Well, gosh, that's proof of that is Boogie Nights, to Scotty J.
Yeah, he's tremendous in that movie.
That he only has like a little tiny scene, but that scene when he cries and talks about how he's just a fucking idiot, it is just like forever heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. No one has walked out of that scene unscathed.
Because we all feel a little bit of that. You know, maybe we're not as down on ourselves as that character, but in certain moments in our lives, we've all felt that.
Yeah.
That's my favorite scene in Magnolia, when he's calling and ordering all the... he's like ordering Hustler and Penthouse and all this stuff.
Yes!
And bread and peanut butter, and goes on the lady on the other end after he mentions the dirty magazines. It's like, do you still want the peanut butter? Yes.
But he has that look of like, why did you ask me that? Yeah. Oh,
I love him.
I'm sure, though, the relationship that they have informs as well why this movie is like his favorite. Yeah. Don't you think, like, if you see one of your best friends and now they're dead, I mean, you can't imagine what that must be like.
Because it's his best performance and now he's gone. Yeah, that's got to be part of why it's his favorite.
Yeah.
On a slow boat to China, all to myself, alone. Get you and keep you in my arms evermore. Leave all your lovers are weeping on a faraway shore, way out on the briny, with the moon big and shiny, melting your heart of stone. I wanna get you on a slow boat to China, all to myself, alone.
Amy Adams kills it in this one. Joaquin Phoenix, obviously.
Let's not let Amy Adams' performance go untalked about.
It's easy because it's not as big of a role in terms of like the crazy character thing.
But Peggy Dodd was the master.
Yeah.
Like, she's the one that has control over Lancaster. We don't see that a lot, but there's a couple scenes, including when she just grabs his groin and is scolding him, where she clearly has control over the cause more so than he does. And then one of those last scenes when they're in England and she's just like beside him, kind of like in the back, but then speaks up. Like, She's the one pulling the strings.
Well,
and is the one who I think Lancaster's talking about. Like, oh, like, if you can figure out how to live without a master, which no one's ever done ever, like, let me know. And I feel like she's, like, his master.
Well, and it seems like, too, during that part, maybe it's also a question of faith. I think there's a real ambiguity of whether or not Lancaster Dodd himself believes in what he's talking about. How much of this is he making up? How much of it is his true beliefs? Whereas there's no question throughout the whole film. It's you either do it for 1 billion years or it's nothing at all.
Yes, which, again, thinking of the Scientology connections, there's that 1 billion-year contract you sign when you sign up for Scientology. And that's literally what she said. She's the one who has the line about, don't defend, attack, which was in the trailer, I think, even. Amy Adams' character, Peggy, is based really strongly on Mary Sue Hubbard, who was L. Ron Hubbard's third wife. Okay. And she was in it in the same way. Dianetics had happened. He was already kind of this persona, but Scientology changed a lot when she was involved, similarly to that character of Peggy. I mean, she was kind of the captain of the organization in a lot of ways. And a redhead. Which, I don't know how much we can dig into that, but there's definitely a redhead thing with Scientology and this movie.
That extends beyond. I don't know what's going on. There's a beach party going on in my mouth today, apparently. But anyways,
what's that beach party?
Bouncing all around in there. Anyways, what were we just talking about? Redheads. Okay. So she was a redhead. Doris Day is a redhead in the film.
L. Ron Hubbard.
Redhead?
Yeah, okay.
Strawberry blonde.
Strawberry blonde.
Close enough.
His children, redheads. He preferred the redheaded children.
Oh, what a fascinating fact in that movie.
Yeah, okay. I didn't notice any of that.
Yeah, so there's kind of this specialness to redheads in real life in Scientology at that time and in the movie.
Yeah.
So it's there, and Chris already mentioned his son, L. Ron Hubbard Jr., was a part of Scientology growing up, but then kind of disavowed the whole thing and said his dad was a fraud. Thank you for crossing that off. We have his son Quentin, who is another kind of rising star in Scientology, but ended up committing suicide. And also, broke from his father's beliefs. I don't know, how much do we want to dig into Scientology right now? Is this the time?
As much as we like.
Before we get away from Amy Adams' character in there, what's her name again? I'm sorry.
Peggy.
She is the most complex female character that exists in the entire Paul Thomas Anderson universe. She very interesting. She kind of sticks out. It has been known often and talked about in many circles that a lot of the female characters are nothing more than just kind of plot points in a lot of his movies, where she really is like a very strong and very curious person throughout the whole
There's
thing.
the fact that she controls him with sex, which I think is maybe still
troublesome.
kind of
Yeah, I agree.
Settles back into that.
The stern hand job is that.
You better watch it, Mr. You're going to be getting a stern hand job.
It didn't look very fun.
Is he crying? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Oh man, that scene. I mean, that scene is all her too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Philip Seymour Hoffman is just sort of there. She controls that scene and makes it pop. Like, oh my god.
Furthermore, the scene where they're doing the processing with Peggy and Change My Eyes to Black, that whole thing, she's reading like the highly graphic kind of porn stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The history of that was they just had like a moment where they were waiting for something to happen on set, and Paul Thomas Anderson brought out some Victorian porn and just said, "Hey, do you mind? I just want to try this for a second." And she read it and was highly kind of uncomfortable, but I guess kind of excited to read it, and it made the scene. I love it when Freddie Quell goes, "I don't want to hear that." That's a straight scene. Okay, Scientology. Let's do it.
Was that my cue?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. Well, I mean, I have all these connections written down that I've noticed. I read about, we mentioned Lawrence Wright wrote Going Clear, which was my main source of information that really made that connection for me. You have Dianetics, which are obviously, what do they call it? Processing instead of auditing. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. which the line of questioning is very similar. It's all about going back into your past lives and past injuries. Scientologists believe that injury can go back to, obviously past lives, but also there's a big emphasis on pregnancy, and the fact that Peggy's pregnant for most of the movie is significant, I think, because one, it creates a timeline for the movie, and two, Scientologists also believe that you can be injured before birth through, sex, and they're super anti-abortion, obviously, because I think it's part of a, lifetime memory that you carry with you. You have, obviously L. Ron Hubbard, who is a science fiction writer, who wrote a book called Excalibur, which, did any of you catch the name of the book in the movie?
Yes.
No.
Excalibur, which is a what? Sorry, I'm a teacher.
Oh, the saber.
Yeah.
The split saber.
So Excalibur is a sword, and then the name of the book that he wrote was Split Saber.
Got it.
And there's this mythology about Excalibur where the first people to read it, the first 4 or 6 people to read it, died or committed suicide. And so in a deleted scene from the movie, which I think is really interesting, they chose to delete this. I don't think you guys would have seen it. When they're going to the desert and digging up that special thing, whatever it is, that was supposed to be the book that caused everyone to commit suicide.
Wow.
So they're pulling this, this amazing magical book out of the desert, and again, I think it was a really interesting choice to take that out of the movie, because watching it, I was so curious as to what they were digging up and why it was so important, and it was Lancaster Dodd's version of L. Ron Hubbard's Excalibur.
Piggybacking off with the deleted scenes, if anyone has the Blu-ray, you got to see the deleted scenes. Mm-hmm. Paul Thomas Anderson did an amazing job of curating it and adding all these cool kind of things. Going to what you're saying, do you remember in the deleted scenes, it's Freddie Quell's job to guard it. And he's like, you're the only one. You're the only one who can do this.
Oh, yeah. Okay, go
ahead. He opens the box.
Sorry, I just burped at you.
It's a very strange scene. Actually, we might have seen it in the trailer. He opens the box and fire comes out.
Yeah. Really? So it creates this kind of magical moment that otherwise doesn't really exist in the movie, except for maybe the eyes changing color.
This might be grasping at straws, but it's kind of a fun analysis piece. Is the suggestion later on in life Freddie Quell commits suicide?
Obviously, there's a lot that's been made out of, the kind of the beginning point for what we're modeling off of was Dianetics, the early days of Dianetics, 1950. Kind of a lot of similarities to that,
and that was created by L. Ron Hubbard, who later founded Scientology. That's right.
I'd come across these old newsletters called Abbery, which is made by the Hart couple down in Arizona, and it was kind of like the best way to inhabit, to try to get to know the people that might have been interested in anything from handwriting analysis to yoga to new diets to past lives therapy. This couple, the Harts, were into it all, and they wrote this newsletter that actually went from around 1951, 52 to the mid 60s. And I kind of poured through most of them as much as I could and found it the best way to try to hold hands with the past and kind of get to know these people and what their feelings were, what the kind of ins and outs were amongst these groups.
Can you give a couple of examples of things that you learned from them about beliefs or the kinds of people who subscribe to this newsletter?
Well, there was a variety of people. Really a kind of crazy variety. If you'd been a sort of census taker, you'd be probably baffled by the wide variety. I think the most thing in common is they're all white, but rich and poor. Some people coming back from the war. Newly divorced women at the time in the sort of early 50s, a few of those. A lot of engineers, men who were into science fiction or fantasy. People who were just sort of forward thinkers. People that had made their way down to Arizona. I know a couple people talked to friends of mine whose parents migrated down to Arizona in the early 50s, which sort of you got to think about that. You know, you're probably coming from the Midwest or the East, and there's coming from this freezing cold. You know, they just want to get out of there. And you're kind of getting down to this kind of barren place where you're probably in search of some spirituality or some other kind of ways of thinking and living. There was a kind of wide open feeling to a lot of the things that I was reading, and a lot of investigation and an openness to anything, which felt like, you know, kind of a pre-hippie thinking.
Or did he before the last few scenes of the movie?
Oh, no, he watched Casper.
But he didn't watch Casper.
Yeah.
He didn't. He even said it was a dream. And it was so, like, who brings a phone into a movie? Okay, anyway, we can talk about all that.
That's supposed to be a dream.
We'll talk
Which
about
I
this.
did not get as we were watching
No,
it. And then once they were talking, I was
like,
like, what?
how would he call it in a movie theater? Yeah, okay.
Excuse me, sir, sleeping and watching cartoons.
I guess I
Doesn't call for
believed,
you from England.
I believed in the power of Lancaster Dodd to be able to like figure out specifically where Freddie Well is and be able to
He's
call
probably
him.
seeing Casper right now.
So that I think we have to talk about all that.
Yeah, we got analysis coming up.
But we have things, you know, the end, there's this ambiguous moment where he asks where their daughter is, and she says, oh, she's in DCF, which they never explain, but...
And you don't even realize it unless you're kind of looking for it. Last time we watched it with the subtitles so we could actually see it.
Yes. Which a lot of people believe to be the same as RPF or like the hole in Scientology when people are punished for being bad Scientologists. It's almost like according to Lawrence Wright, it's almost like a labor camp. A lot of people think that's where the current Scientology leader's wife has been for years and years. Right. So there's some small references at the ends of the movie to kind of ambiguous parts of Scientology.
And it's like this small of a piece. It's just like a little sentence. I've watched it 1,000 times, never noticed it until this last time.
Yeah. Well, same with, I mean, if we're talking about the ending, we don't shy away from spoilers at all. Freddie Quell's in the movie theater watching a cartoon of Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Which is a beautiful scene.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's one that Esme's actually watched on like a YouTube compilation of cartoons.
Not the master, but
not the master. We don't show her that yet.
No.
But the Casper where he finally gets a friends. Obviously, the whole point of Casper the Friendly Ghost is he's trying to find friends, but everyone's afraid of him. And he finds this little boy to go hunt treasure with and pretend to be pirates. And they talk about like, oh, it's okay, Casper. What is the line? Like, we're tied together.
We're tied together.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then he says, the captain never leaves the ship. And then when he finally goes to England to go see Lancaster, on Lancaster's desk is a captain.
And over the phone, he says, we're tied. He's like, how did you find me? And Lancaster tells him, we're tied together.
And furthermore, once he finally explains how they knew each other in past lives, which I love all that, Prussian, so I love all that stuff. But what is it that they did for a job? Was they had balloons.
Yeah, they're saying.
They were in like the Prussian army.
Over the Prussian army line in Paris, yeah.
And only 2 balloons came up missing.
And that's always one of the funniest parts of Scientology, kind of getting back to that of these past lives. It's never that their past life was like, you just like cleaned up garbage for like the town or something. Their past life is always something, I was in King Arthur's court, or I was in, doing...
Everyone's Cleopatra.
Everyone's Cleopatra, exactly. And that's just, it's ridiculous. There's no way that everybody in the cause or in Scientology could have had this incredibly important past life. They're just saying that because it's what they know of history, and it sounds much more interesting than I just was like a woman who had 12 kids and never left the house and then died.
Yes. Well, and furthermore, during that scene, he gives that whole thing. He's like smiling and about to cry, like telling how they met each other. But then the camera cuts back to Freddie. He has a complete motionless stare as if to say, I know this is all bullshit. But then he says something like, maybe in the next life. And then he says the line about like, we will be sworn enemies. Yeah. And then Freddie Quell laughs. Like, then it's like he's reminded of the things that he loves about him. It's a very beautiful scene. Very sad.
So good. It is. Yeah. That being the last Philip Seymour Hoffman scene. Not of his, he was in like the Hunger Games or whatever, but, to me, that being his last
meaningful performance.
So
Well, maybe we'll get to the end a little bit more specific. Is there some more?
So with those 2 scenes, the movie theater into the England scene, when he goes and brings the cools and goes to find Master, who's kind of established himself in this whole new realm.
which he had to do because the American government was coming after L. Ron Hubbard because of tax evasion, probably. What else was it? I can't remember why he had to get the heck out of the
even
country.
all those things with like kidnapping with
Yeah,
his daughter,
exactly. It was just
and
like the legal things were mounting up against L. Ron Hubbard, and it was just like, well, we got to go to a different country.
and they were pinging around on that Sea Org boat, but no one wanted them.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, isn't there a connection too between the name of the boat? What's the name? Is it the Ophelia in the movie? The boat's called Ophelia, and in Scientology, the boat is another Greek name that starts with an O.
Oh.
It's like the same.
Okay.
I don't know enough about all of what I just said, but there you go. Put that fact in your face.
The lanterncinema@gmail.com.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying. So we have the scene in the movie theater, which seems kind of dreamlike anyway. Again, it's Casper. He's the only one in there. Someone brings him a phone. It's Lancaster wanting him to come to England and bring him cigarettes. And when he gets there, he says, I think they're asking, like, why did you come here? He says, I had a dream. He actually says that.
He says it.
He did, yeah.
Which, it almost seems realistic on first watching, but he says, I had a dream. He brings him the cigarettes. I don't know why that detail's so important to me, but
the cools.
Well, that's in the dream, right? He asks him.
Yes.
Yeah, he says they don't
no
have cools. And Freddie goes through this huge journey. I mean, this is like 1950s. He goes all the way to England just to say, I don't want to be with you anymore, basically, because he's given the opportunity to stay, and he says no, which I think is almost hard to empathize with, but you think about how Freddie's developed as a character, and it's like he finally makes that final break, but I think it's a beautiful ending to the movie, and then to follow up with the woman in the bar and see how Freddie's become a stronger person in a lot of ways, but also disconnected from Lancaster.
In the Spurb book, he talks about specifically on Dodd and Freddie's relationship. He says, whereas Dodd and his cause symbolize the deeply rooted need for meaning in the terrifying meaninglessness of post-World War, Freddie in the end embodies America's still unresolved demons, the psychological fallout from the war, the continuing need to solve issues through violence, and the constant tendency towards self-destruction and the unapologetic shift towards excess. How beautiful is that?
That's perfect,
Yeah.
Everything about that is absolutely correct.
And the thing too that happens that, I think is either beautiful or troubling, depending on your point of view, is the love song that Lancaster Dodd sings to him.
I love that P.T. Anderson, not once but twice, makes Philip Seymour Hoffman sing.
Well, actually, I wrote down singing on my notes here. I actually kind of have a theory that the movie's kind of broke up into three different segments with the singing. There's the roving scene where all the women are wonderfully naked and just out of nowhere.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, how do we not talk about this?
I mean, I love it. The energy of that is just awesome. Once again, a roving, I would imagine the idea of, going on some kind of journey. Then there's actually the scene where Doris sings to him.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Almost in a cradling kind of way. I don't remember the song off the top of my head what she sings. Anyone remember?
I don't either.
But then it ends at the very end with Slow Boat to China. And me and Hannah was discussing this in the car last night, just how wonderfully long it is. It goes through the one verse, which seems like, okay, maybe that could happen. But then once it goes back to that camera on it, sailed on a slow boat to China. Awesome.
It's great. And the symbolism, I looked at that song, and it's symbolism that's pretty easy to grasp. It's about the slow boat to China being the longest amount of time someone could imagine. I'd like to be with you for that amount of time, just us two. It's his wife has just left the room, and he can tell him how he does truly feel about him, that, like, I really do care about you, but he chooses to do it by singing this song.
Wow.
But I don't think the symbolism is that hard to grasp when you actually look at what the song's about. It's just these two guys that wish they could be like each other and be together, but they just can't.
Yes.
Which I think the love story of Freddie and Lancaster is another thing, I mean, we haven't talked about it, but there's just so many moments that go into that. But the fact that they truly just like love each other, they're like rolling around in the grass, or he's
singing to each other.
He's giving Lancaster booze, and Lancaster's giving him knowledge
this is all to the bafflement of everyone around them who does not like Freddy.
Yeah, it doesn't get their relationship at all.
Well, as a matter of fact, we're all WTF fans here on their podcast. When Paul Thomas Anderson was on there, they get to The Master, and Mark Maron says, like, that Master movie, that's one I had to keep going back to try to figure out. He's like, once it got to the singing, I was just like, why don't you guys just fuck already? And then they all, Paul Thomas Anderson and him just laugh, and Paul Thomas Anderson says, you're not wrong. Because it is, like, it's so romantic. Mm-hmm. The movie itself is so romantic. Yeah. But I think it goes back to the greater characteristics of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, where it's like this search for human connection. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, last time I was watching it, I was like, okay, so obviously this thing is about, Lancaster Dodd being this master that has some influence over others. But I was struck by how much Freddie Quell has a power over him. Specifically, I wrote in my notes, I was like, Freddie Quell as shaman? Because it's almost like throughout the whole film, he's the one that's making this,
what does he call it? Like brew. A magical elixir or something.
Yeah. Because we haven't even talked about what's in that, but like we see him like taking something out of a torpedo at one point, and like different stuff from like his film, and like all sorts of crazy shit.
Yeah. And you have to drink it right, which is you figure out later why that guy and Salinas dies, because he just just must have gulped the whole jar or whatever. And you're supposed to drink it right, which I guess means don't drink too much at once, otherwise you'll be poisoned.
Well, and at one point, the lady in the store, his first kind of conquest that we see in the movie, she says, "Oh, what is in this?" And he goes, "Secrets." So I actually find some similarities between Lancaster and Freddy. I think they have like a symbiotic relationship where they both need each other in the romantic sense, I suppose. But also there's this kind of, ephemeral power that they have. And something that Peggy obviously recognizes, and it has a big problem with this idea of all this booze.
What's the word I'm looking for? She's defensive. She's like threatened by Freddy and the relationship they have.
I don't know if she says hooch in the movie, but it seems
she
like
says hooch.
I think she does.
Okay.
Yeah, because she's the one that like wants Lancaster to stop drinking it, and she's always the one to like instigate a confrontation with Quill, or like with just getting rid of him. Like if she was not in this movie, or if that character did not have that role, they would have had this romantic relationship just forever and ever, most likely. Like she is the one that prevented that.
Well, essentially, they're the ones that have the conflict, right? Like, Freddy could have the power over him. Yeah. But she has,
I love that line, too, before she leaves. I don't know that it's her last line, but she says something effective. Like, you just can't take this life straight, Freddy.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's rough.
That's sad. That last scene is just a heartbreaker. Gorgeous, though.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Was there anything else with Scientology, or are we feeling pretty good?
Oh, my gosh. No, like I said, there's so much. Like, every single episode we do, we could talk about it for hours and hours, but we won't do that to Elliot. We won't do that to each other.
I think the long and short of Scientology is what you get from the movie is that, and what I still think about Scientology is it's for as crazy as people paint it to be, and yes, I agree, it's crazy. It is so close to being on point, because it is in essence a self-help philosophy, and there's nothing that inherently wrong with it. Right? It is trying to make people have a better life, but it does it in this way that makes people also powerless in the face of the movement above them, and it does it in a way that is just couched in too much stuff that could be characterized as flim-flam.
Yes.
The past lives and the alien Xenu and the 73 trillion years ago or whatever. It just misses the mark just barely, but if it got rid of some of that stuff, and if it didn't make people so powerless over their own, lose their own willpower, it would just be a self-help, and to just be a better person who communicates with the people in their lives better.
Xenu doesn't even bother me.
No.
It's what, because every religion has craziness to it, but it's the fact that, like the idea of suppressive persons and things like that. The fact that you're not questioning.
Exactly.
That leads to so many.
There's no room for any dissent at all. And that there definitely is a prison camp that people go to, or that the ways that they're treated are awful. And that's the other part where they definitely missed the mark. And if they could just treat it like a thing where people could just come and be themselves and try to get better, it'd be fine. But instead they just couch it in all this nonsense. And then they also try to, if I can shout out my favorite podcast, Oh Yeah Dude, Seth from Oh Yeah Dude, every year at during the Hollywood Christmas Parade, which is just like this innocuous, Christmas parade, and they have floats of all these famous characters. But there's always like, oh, and now we have the float. This is the character Wilson P. Feather or whatever from the book, the Men and His Soldiers, and it's some L. Ron Hubbard, it's some Scientology thing. It's just sticking out like a sore thumb in the middle of,
She's a Scientologist?
The guy who's on the podcast? No. Oh. He's like, how crazy it is. Right? I was just like, okay, we gotta pretend like this is normal, And that's the kind of stuff they do, of just, they try to insert themselves in all these weird ways that just doesn't, it just doesn't make sense, and they're never going to be taken seriously or taken as a normal religion or way of life because of everything they've done to alienate everyone who's not in it.
Yeah. Right. To me, The Master represents a period in Paul Thomas Anderson's work where he had really reached like the true period of maturation, right? Like it's like the moment where, he's almost created an entirely different cinematic experience that one could ever have going to a theater. It starts with Punch Drunk Love, continues with There Will Be Blood, and is still going on right now. That's why every time a Paul Thomas Anderson movie comes out, cinephiles are just like excited to see what the next thing he's going to do. If the movie was just an exploration on Scientology, it wouldn't be very interesting. As a result of incorporating all of these vast degrees of influences, it creates just this beautiful and interesting movie. Another thing that Paul Thomas Anderson, in making this film, a big reason he decided to do it was, in a way, kind of an ode to his father, who was Ernie Anderson, the great Ghoulardi, who was he was a what am I trying to say? First off, he had like, radio host? Yeah, he was a radio host or like a TV host that did these kind of horror movie kind of things, but then furthermore he became the announcer on ABC, so that has a certain thing. And at the end of this, if you're interested, please listen all the way at the end. I'm going to include this amazing reel of just bloopers from his dad, because it's just fascinating. But his dad was someone that existed in this kind of World War II era and told a lot of stories to Paul Thomas Anderson of what these guys were kind of like. So through the lens of his dad, through the lens of people in World War II, this idea of rebirth in the post-World War II experience, and this idea of human connection, there's really not a movie like The Master.
I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we'll include a couple extras at the end here. Listen for that. We also have a friend named Peter Casey who has directed his own movies, and he, in a dinner at one point with me and Hannah, he describes when he was filming his movie, watching The Master every single day, which I found to be a fascinating thing. So with that, is there anything else we really want to add, or?
I don't know. There's one moment that I thought about earlier, to kind of relate back to Freddie Quill being this substitute for like America and being violent and aggressive and like having problems. I don't know why I'm thinking about it now, but the scene for the second book release, but then when he takes that guy outside and just starts pummeling him, but then has this moment where he's like, wait, you're right. Like, I'm still beating the crap out of you, but like, I might also finally be listening to you right now. Like, for me, that was one of the moments where like maybe somebody else from the outside like did finally get in his head more. Like, you had the son say something days or weeks or months prior, you're having it like again, and he's still having this like a visceral violent reaction, but at least at some point like stopping it. And then I don't think it's too long from there when he is out in the desert and leaves on the bike. Like, that was like a moment for me where it's like, yeah, he's still him, but like starting to think about things differently and maybe leave.
Well, and that scene also precedes the amazing jail scene, right? Where he breaks the toilet, which that was a museum where he broke the toilet, and the museum was forever pissed. That was a one-take scene.
Damn. Oh my god!
It had to be, though, looking at Joaquin Phoenix and that incredibly physical and scary.
Oh, it's just unbelievable, that scene.
But
him reacting. I think before the scene before the jail scene is when the son is expressing, you telling him that he's making it up, and then Freddy's like shaking him around in the chair, like.
And then the cops show up, and then he's like, "Okay, I'll tone it down until I'm gonna fight them now."
He fights the cops.
Yeah.
And that scene also just perfectly demonstrates that these two characters are almost the same. They both are people, they can't control themselves. They're like caged animals when they're face to face with each other. They just can't, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Just beautiful, just great. So.
It's a very cool movie, and I'm glad we were here to talk about it. I love it.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Thanks again for doing this with us.
Thank you guys for
We'd like to thank Elliot Imes for making it.
It's super nice you guys let me hang out here.
Please make sure to check out our screening of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls on May 23rd.
Vaudeville News.
We'd like to thank Paul Thomas Anderson for coming here today. He was extremely quiet, but we appreciate your presence.
He was doing a lot of nodding.
Enthusiastic, smiling, and nodding.
What's our next movie? Well, we have something secret that may be happening, so we're going to keep that.
Okay, the secret is staying shelved for now. I wasn't going to pick this one. You convinced me to do it. Wayne's World.
Yeah!
Very different from anything else we've talked about. A little more lighthearted.
Perfect.
Less violence in that one. Less emotional manipulation. But it's an Anna Sferis film. We haven't talked about female directors.
We need to
at all. So we're changing
Penelope.
that in like a goofy way.
We love her, so I'm happy to talk about her.
And we were going to do one of her movies in January at the Muse, and ended up having to cancel that from weather. So I'm glad we're finally bringing some of her work into the Lantern Cinema. And I'm gonna just probably quote this movie way too much when we're talking about it. So sorry in advance.
That's gonna be a fun.
Get ready.
It's a very quotable movie. I saw it in the theater when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
And my mom covered my eyes during the gratuitous sex scene. She was dying laughing while covering my eyes. Vivid memories from it, but yeah, I can't wait to hear that, guys. That's going to be awesome.
Thank you all for listening. Please.
Penelope Sferis. I don't know why I said Anna.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
My daughter's Anna. That's what it is.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Please, what does everyone say at the end of the podcast? This could help us. Please
subscribe,
rate. We could use some ratings. Please help us out.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at The Lantern Cinema. You can email us at the aforementioned Gmail account.
Yeah. If anyone wants us to sell like Sugar Bear Hair or Me Undies or MailChimp, I don't know.
Yeah.
Squarespace.
We're gonna sell out so hard. Yeah. So fast.
Hey, thank you guys so much. Bye.
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 I'll go no more roving with you, fair maid. A roving, since roving's been my ruach, and I'll go no more roving with you, fair maid. Her eyes are blue, her cheeks are red, mark well what I do say. Her eyes are blue, her cheeks are red, the wealth of her is on her head. I'll go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. A-roving's been my ruach. Go no more a-roving with you, fair maid. I put my arm around her waist, mark well what I do say. I put my arm around her waist, she said, young man, you're in some haste. I put that girl upon my knee, mark well what I do say. I put that girl upon my knee, she said, young man, you're rather free. Sotto voce. She swore that she'd be good to me. Mark well what I do say. She swore that she'd be good to me. She spent my money fast and free. The senator was our captain, he was a mighty dog. Served out to all the company a double share of strong. Everyone!
Hey guys, so Dustin asked me to retell the story about the month or so in my life when I watched The Master like 40 or 50 times in a row. And then to tell you guys what I got out of it, or what I was hoping to get out of it. I was in the middle of editing my first film, first original film, and I got stuck, and I felt like it might be a bad idea to finish it, or it might, what I knew is that it wasn't going to be what I thought it was, and I didn't really know how to finish it. So I kind of just stopped editing and I started watching movies, because that's just what I do. I watch movies no matter what, but like instead of editing, I was watching movies. And I went back and I watched The Master, and I had seen it back when it came out, and I loved it then, but I hadn't really watched it again, and I don't know, man, something just got stuck in me, and I don't know, I just watched it again, like immediately after. So I watched it twice in a row, I think, that first time, just back to back, because I was just so in love with it. And then I just started watching it for some reason, like no other movie seemed appealing, and I don't know why. I just don't know why. But I watched it like every night for at least a month, and I'm not sure why still. I think maybe, well, I mean, I know it was a great movie, and I know I wanted to know what made it great, but more so outside of like outside of the academic sense, like I was trying to get like the feel, like why does it feel like it does to me, and why does that feeling that doesn't really have any connection to any individual part of the film or actor or performance, or why do I just love the whole thing like I do? And I don't think I have an answer really for that, but I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but maybe I think what I got out of it was I maybe got to know another person's film close to as well as I know my own. And like while I was editing it, while you're editing, you're going over the pieces of these films and like different shots and like different pieces of audio, and it's like a patchwork, and you're like going over and over and over and again, and it stops becoming like a film and just starts becoming like this weird repetitive, like hypnotic thing, and you kind of sometimes forget what you're looking at, like you can't see the forest for the trees. And so I was like stuck. That's where I was at the beginning, before I started watching this movie over and over again.
Do it again. Just go on another track. That's all you got to do. So, if any of you or your friend... Oh, Jesus. Jesus Christ. Well, let me explain something to you. There's something wrong with this picture. I'm fucking leaving here. You have another plan? Answer the phone, you dumb fuck. Roll the fucking thing and shut her up. Just say we're rolling quiet on the set. It's in a total fucking state of fucking disaster.
God damn.
All right, if you want the opening faster, we'll do it faster. Do it, because we don't want to miss one listener. We don't want anybody tuning out. It ain't gonna mean one more fucking video. Jesus God. There is a way to do this shit, and this isn't it.
Ernie?
Oh, fuck. Call Vince. I'm part of the fucking show. I don't want to repeat.
Did I say a fucking word? It's
No, but
fine.
you gave me that goddamn look.
Ugh, now I can't even look at him. I'll go in the other room during this.
See, I told you we could work this out.
I know, it worked
I
out
said, stick with me, and we'll get rid of the bit. I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead and roll, Tim.
You rolling, Tim?
Speed!
Good boy. More funny people and their funniest videos. And the new
Should we give it a whirl?
Sure, fuck. Well, that's what I'm sitting here for.
Okay, let's do it.
Tonight, on the new America's Funniest People, you'll hear fuck it. Well, I'm gonna tell you something right now. I ain't gonna make it. Not with anything other than a fucking Looney Tune. Get somebody in here that can that calls horse races. Oh fuck! We got such a long way to go. Can I get some indication that we're rolling or something? Are you over there by yourself, or are we?
I'm in another world.
Are we a team here?
We're a team.
I'm sitting here picking my nose. Ah, fuck. My fault.
Okay.
Not really.
I'll pick it up.
I don't care what you do. Whatever you think we ought to do, we'll do. Let's just try it. I don't know what I'm going to say. By the time I say it, I'll have said it. If it fits, then we will leave it. Jesus Christ. What am I doing here? Here we go. Same thing. Tonight, on America's Funniest People, the studio audience will choose who will marry tonight on the Marabamada. You got something you can do? Because I'll kind of dick fuck around here and call somebody. You'll see an American gladiator's son walk his shit. You'll see an American appliance. That's a big hole, but I can't do anything about it. You'll have to put some sound effects in there or some fucking pig whistles or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? Somebody's got to give a shit. Not me. Jesus, this is terrible fucking writing. There's no fucking hook here. There's no tease. It's dead on. I don't know what to do. I know, but I don't think it would work any fucking better than what we got. There's no tempo to the fucking thing. It just gets out there and then fucking goes plop. And they walk around. The fuck is all that?
That was perfect.
Oh, shit. Perfect.
Perfect is a relative
To what? To them walking off to the woods?
In my feeble mind, okay?
Okay. I understand. Showbiz. See? I'm going to tell you how you can save this piece of shit. Just because I want to get it out of my system. I know you really don't give a shit, but I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm going to send these to TV Writing 101 as examples of how not to do it. Particularly that opening. Where do they find these fucking writers? Either leave, or I should come about maybe 2 or 3 days earlier and get this shit straightened out. Whoever is responsible for producing this thing has no idea what the fuck they're doing. The numbers don't surprise me. Let me just also say that not only did I think it was not funny, I didn't think it was well done. They had one funny thing and they fucked that up by their cuts and their direction and their audio. That's fun. That's great. That's good stuff. Oh, it's just fucking great. Jesus Christ. Fucking amateurs. What? Fucker! Let's see what we can do with this.
Okay.
If you're ready, I mean, we'll wait for her, you know. I fucking have no idea what she's saying.
You really want me to translate for you, or does it matter?
If I gave a shit, move your body, do it, do it. Move your body, do it, do it.
You're not rolling on this, are you?
No. Okay, let's do it. Let's stop fucking around. We can dump the beep beep, right?
Yeah. No, they want to hear that.
Oh, fuck. It doesn't say so on the script.
I know, it should.
Okay. All right. Okay. See what it says here? That's what I'm going to say here. And you'll meet our special guest rock at Paul's Tits. And you'll meet our special guest fuck. There's no special guest. He's just a guest. Fuck him. Well, I'm stuck. Jesus Christ, I hate it when it's near the end of the week. Puzzle gets fucking tougher. And you'll meet our guest co-host from the hit series Oh Fuck It.
Great up to fuck it, I gotta tell you.
I know. Dead on.
Dead on.
Right to the fuck it. Okay, punch after fuck it. Plus, you'll see to himself punch. Fuck. Plus. Do it again. Get your teammates on the basketball court. Fuck.
Ernie?
Fuck you. I'm not even going to talk to you. Jesus, this is shit. Let's finish this motherfucker. If you thought that was frighteningly funny, what the fuck? I can't say frighteningly. Frighteningly. If you thought that was frighteningly funny, and I know that. I'm going to make him sorry he's listening to me someday. Cocksucker. 3. If you thought that was frightening... What do we got? 4? Anybody keeping count?
4, Ernie.
Thank you, baby. What's his name again? Here we go. Not that you give a fuck. Here we go. If you thought that was frighteningly funny, oh, cocksucker. Yeah. This is 5. If you thought that was frighteningly funny, fuck suck. We'll do a pickup. See if we can do something with something. It just ain't there. It's just words. Okay, let's try it again. 6. We'll just blow through it. Here we go. If you thought that was frighteningly cock-a-doodle dick shit. What an asshole. You ready? Here we go. If you thought that was a fright and funny. Fuck it. We'll just muffle it. Pisco. There's no place to have fun with this shit. We'll do the whole thing again. It don't fucking matter, man. It's bing bang, it's bing bang, bing. That's all what the fucking tempo is. We're just into tempo here. Just keep the fucking thing moving. It's a deathly hole, but if you want it. I am sitting there fucking dying. What's the difference?
Well, one thing is funny and one thing is outrageous.
When you get this nit picked, would you show it to me? How big is this fucking nit? Well, we've gotten nowhere. Well, let me just fucking do it again. God damn. Roll. We'll do it again. Jesus Christ. You know what? It's all a fucking kiss my ass mishmash. It's a fucking moose fuck opening. Blah, 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 blah. It doesn't fucking matter that everything is dead on. It's a mishmash of shit. It's all the shit that's gonna happen and fly by. The whole aura is gone, you know? I'm getting so I hate it. I'm not gonna do that whole fucking thing again.
Chill out.
I'm chilled out. You should see me when I'm really pissed. Where are you, asshole? Fuck. Oh, fuck it. Cocksucker. I think go fuck yourself was good. Right on the tip of my tongue. You've got yourself a booth and ounce. Fuck it. Let's just do it as written. And if it really sucks, we'll fix it. Attention, America. We're looking for families doing funny and that was all right. That was no better, no worse than the other one. But it was different, at least. I won't walk out the door if I don't think it's right. I, honest to God, as much as I love you, I almost know what you're saying, but it means nothing. If I had a horse, I'd buy it oats and fuck it. I wasn't aware that we were actually rolling. Sorry about that. Not that fucking sorry, but do it again. I'll do it. I fucked around. I can spit it out. Let's play Prank Patrol and see if we've got pops and then punch in, okay? You'll howl as the Prank Patrol goes on the prowl. Fuck it, doesn't matter. Oh, the mix'll save it, don't worry. We now continue with the new America's Funniest Peep. Fuck it, balls. What else you... Say fuck it. Send your hilarious tapes to us now at this... Hey, there's cash in them there videos, so get them in now, cocksucker, not a prayer. Your funny bone will snap, crackle, and pop to the music. Ah, fuck. Fuck it, cocksucker. My fault. Shit balls. I know better which is a pain in the ass. Okay, here we go. Go. Fuck it. Obviously fuck it. Fuck it. Obviously fuck it. Fuck it. Obviously fuck it. What'd she say?
She says she thinks you need to find a hobby.
He's too bored.
I got a hobby. Busting your ass. That's one of my hobbies.
He is just such an asshole.
I told you you'd fucking hate me if I got sober. You know what I was sitting here wondering? How much you charge a fuck? I wasn't ragging on you.
Oh, who are you ragging on?
Whoever wrote this shit. You'll have your own personal party. Ah, fuck it. Cocksucker. Not to give cocksucking a bad name, you understand? You'll delight at your world-class videos. Ah, fuck it. Oh, good God. Jesus Christ. This is television for the blind. Jesus. That's one of the worst things I've ever done in my life. That's the sorriest moment I think I've had since I've been in this town.